Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Monday, May 13th, 2019. Time for another show. Time for another week. We think things will get better this week. I don't know. I had a weird feeling about this week. Daily Co's Radio is live now. We are told all the way, reliably enough, I'd say, all the way from Portland, Maine. Amazingly, that's how amazing the internet is. Bill's not even here, but he knows Daily Co's Radio is live now. And on today's show, he even knows what we're going to do. Kagro X, that's me, David Waldman. That's how you can reach me via Twitter. Today, I correctly note that on last night's Game of Thrones, I did see it, Daenerys sat in the first class section of the Dragon after promising the peasants she'd only fly coach. You see, they're all liars. That's the thing here. I did, in fact, see the show. That's not a lie. I made sure that I got everything out of the way that I could, anyway, so I could sit down and watch the damn thing, and I wouldn't have to go through the half-hour exercise of putting 24-hour mutes on like 85 key Game of Thrones terms, so that I just didn't want to go through the trouble anymore. And there's only one more shot at getting it right anyway. So, okay, I'm up to date. I'll try not to spoil anything for you. I think I managed to do that both Mondays because I hadn't finished seeing it yet. Now, of course, it's very difficult. I hate when people spoil things, but then it becomes very difficult not to spoil things if you want to talk about the show. So we probably shouldn't talk about the show. That would be of great interest, I think, to those of you not at all interested in the show. Although it's been very interesting watching the discussion online, as it always is. I usually have to avoid it, but it's been interesting chiming in or watching it now. More on the meta level, and I think we can do this without spoilers. I'm pretty sure about that. And I'll try and keep that in mind and edit anything out that I, mentally that I think is coming out. But it's been interesting watching people get upset with the show and upset with the way it portrays events, and that could mean anything. I don't think that's a spoiler. I think that's happened for a long time. But it's interesting watching like half of the audience say this was badly written or poorly motivated for the characters, or just as some kind, what do they say? What's the Deus Ex Machina kind of, they just need something to happen, so they snap their fingers and it happens in some stupid way, whatever. That's been a complaint for a long time about the last couple of episodes, or the last couple of years for that matter. But equally interesting is watching the people who are angry about people being angry about it. I think that's kind of interesting. Anyway, I've always thought the show was a kind of, or could be viewed as a very interesting and brilliant parallel to real life politics, despite the fact that it has dragons in it, etc. There are a couple of stupid magical elements that just don't make any sense. And sometimes they provide impetus for the story and sometimes they don't. But I've always viewed it as a kind of a very interesting view of politics, at its rawest. I mean, there's no voting or anything really, but there's certainly coalition building and the mechanics of accruing power, raising armies, keeping people who contribute to your armies satisfied that their contributions are fairly recognized, and et cetera, and keeping promises to people despite the fact that or violating promises to people despite the fact that circumstances have changed in ways that are entirely plausible, minus the dragons, but which may have been unforeseen, and you have the tension between, well, I wanted you to do the best thing for us versus you promised to do X, and you should fulfill that promise, and it's always very interesting to watch, and I guess it's been similarly interesting to watch here, and here, without getting into specifics about what anybody did that made viewers upset or question their motives, I guess again here it's an interesting parallel to the real world, and maybe people are a little bit upset because the show they've chosen to help them escape from the real world, in which we say, how the hell did we get here? I never saw this coming, or this person promised X but delivered not X, and is a liar, and for terrible reasons at that. and then to turn on your escapist show and find out that, well, the show is like that too, and you don't know how the hell you got here, and people who promised this or that have ended up not delivering that, but for reasons that are in some cases understandable and some cases not. It's just been very interesting watching also people try to put limits on one another in terms of what they're allowed to discuss and critique. And of course, interesting watching that other segment of the population who don't watch have their various reactions. The proper one, I assume, generally speaking, is the one where you just say, okay, that happened. I'm not interested in that. Lots of news happened that I didn't get interested in. Versus there's this strange perverse pride, and people are trying to not watch one another, which is kind of interesting as well. But that just that's human foibles for you, and that's at bottom what the show is all about. So we have a lot to catch up on that happened over the weekend. I think it rained too much here and everywhere for Donald Trump to play golf, and consequently he went more crazy than usual and had a very active Twitter weekend, most of which I skipped, and I'm happy to have done that, but it has repercussions throughout the news. It shows up in headlines. Greg Dworkin is here at long last. I'll let him talk, and we'll round up for what happened. Hey, how you doing?
So I'm a non-watcher, and I was watching Game of Thrones Twitter like, this is like football Twitter, except for TV shows you don't watch.
Yeah, right. I know who won, and there you go.
That's fine. You guys can talk about it. But Hans Noel, who is the co-author of The Parties Decided and an esteemed and distinguished political scientist, says, everybody would be perfectly thrilled with the last season of Game of Thrones if it had been spread out over 2 regular-length seasons and had the pacing of season 1.
That's another thing.
He said the problem isn't whatever happened. It's that it just happened too close together, like everything happened at once.
Yes, that is a little weird.
I don't know. I didn't watch, but that's what he said.
I think that's a lot of people's complaints. Is a lot of times they push back on pushback and say it's not that what happened is not plausible. After all, dragons, but it feels like they just were. We have 2 shows left, and we have to do all these things, and it's crossing the wires and making things that could have been resolved unresolvable.
Well,
maybe
sometimes things come to a head, and let me give you an example of what happens when people actually act within character. Okay, so I tweeted this morning, when you're unfit for office, these things just sort of happen, like all happening at the same time. This really ought to be paced out over several seasons. Instead, it's happening this week. We have Britain warns of Iran-U.S. conflict.
Right.
European Union to meet Pompeo. That is to say, Pompeo reviving the concept of actually talking to allies. So how you wander into a war with Iran, I mean, who could have predicted that? Like, everybody who voted against Trump could have predicted it. Everybody who saw what would happen if John Bolton was put in the White House could have predicted it.
Right.
Oh, by the way, the prospects for trade deals suddenly darken as China looks for a way to save face, says the Washington Post, following which this morning China declared a new set of $60 billion tariffs, which is really going to hurt Midwest farmers.
I guess so.
And then we have
Midwest
North Korea fires 2 short-range ballistic missiles. And, it's who could have predicted this? But it's all happening at once. Why didn't they pace this stuff out over, like, several seasons?
Well, you have only 2 seasons left or whatever, 2 shows. It depends on how you stretch it out. We're having this election. It is like Game of Thrones. The size of the cast is a little bit like Game of Thrones. 10,000 candidates.
So these things do happen, and people actually do sometimes act in character, and then sometimes they do things that surprise you, like going to talk to our European allies.
Yeah, well, maybe we're
That's
not really
totally
sure
not
what
in
he's
character.
doing. Right? There's a lot happening, and sometimes even when people act in character, people refuse to see it. I'm just thinking now of all the old Donald the Dove
Trump is lying
headlines.
To you.
Yeah,
Donald the Dove, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Hillary will get us into war. Donald the Dove will keep us, at peace. All right.
Yeah, Hillary the Hawk, Donald the Dove, right? That was a great Maureen Dowd column that really encapsulates everything you need to know about Maureen Dowd in that one headline.
Right, and so I think a dragon should burn her.
Or swallow her, or whatever.
So anything they want, really. Don't argue with the dragon.
Well, dragons get hungry.
Yeah, sure. I mean,
so having said that, let's talk a little bit about American politics.
All right. Do we slaughter everybody?
I don't know. Do you want to?
If we spread it out, That's fine.
Well, according to this,
we'll use a wood chipper. That'll spread it out.
Current pundit thinking, the Senate is very depressing because no matter what you do, it's structured in such a way that Republicans are going to basically keep power because of their appeal to rural white voters. So says Jamel Bowie, writing in the New York Times. Mm-hmm. But in counterpoint, I have two pieces that I want to highlight. One is a Twitter list of things written. I'll get to that in a minute. But the Washington Post has this fascinating article, unfortunately, because it's not great news. Who's going to take care of these people? As emergencies rise across rural America, a hospital fights for its life. They're running out of supplies. They don't have enough money. And cutting back on Medicaid and trying for rural states in a Republican era that they have in terms of their own state government, trying to desperately avoid doing anything that would support Medicaid because it sounds like something that black president would do, is just having horrible results locally. Same is true for trying to avoid dealing with the opioid crisis.
Yeah.
The hospital's already transferred out most of its patients from Oklahoma and lost half its staff, and the CEO called a meeting to take inventory of what was left. Employees crammed into Tina Steele's office at Fairfax Community Hospital, where the air conditioning was no longer working and the computer software had just been shut off for non-payment. So I want to start with the good news. And she told them a food bank would make deliveries to the hospital and Dollar General would donate office supplies.
Oh, well, all right.
So how desperate are we, one employee said. How much money do we have in the bank? Well, around $12,000.
That's low.
And how long will that last us? Under normal circumstances, maybe a few hours.
Okay. Right?
They've been fending off closure hour by hour for the past several months, ever since debt for the 15-bed hospital surpassed $1 million, and its outside ownership group entered into bankruptcy. Beginning a crisis in Fairfax is becoming familiar across much of rural America. So I entitled the pundit roundup something along the lines of, we have a constitutional crisis, but we also have an everyday life crisis, too. Things like that are happening all over the country. More than 100 of the country's remote hospitals have gone broke and closed in the past decade, turning some of the most impoverished parts of the U.S. into what experts now call health hazard zones. People are out of equipment. There's no oxygen. And the only reason that this hospital had been able to stay open at all was that 30 employees continued showing up to work without pay. If we're not open, where do these people go, said a physician assistant, thinking about the dozens of patients he treated each month in the ER, including some in critical condition after drug overdoses, falls from horses, oil field disasters, or car crashes. They go to the cemetery is where they go. If we're not here, these people don't have time. They'll die along with this hospital. So, these things happen, and they're happening in rural states. And their current governments, which happen to be Republican governments, are doing nothing about it. So what I'm saying is that it may look like things look bleak for the Democratic Party, but you know what? If you insist on not governing and letting everything fall apart, sometimes there are political consequences for that. And you can't just distract with, what about abortion? That may or may not, help you later on.
Could still work. They are very stuck on that.
Sure.
But we've been watching Oklahoma in particular for just a long time. I mean, I remember, I think it was Oklahoma we were reading about, and a couple other states too, where years ago already, we were reading about them deciding to let paved roads revert to gravel rather than repair them.
Yes.
So I guess this kind of goes hand in hand with it. I don't know what to tell you. It's a fascinating story, though, just to think about people saying,
that's the setup for this, because now we're going to talk politics.
Oh. Well, that sort of was. But all right.
And not the economics of hospitals, but that in and of itself is fascinating.
Okay. Well, only we think
so.
That's
Helene Olson, who writes for the
Democrats.
Washington Post, says, for what it's worth, I've argued for months that people are wildly underestimating Elizabeth Warren's appeal to voters. And that comes from this story that's in Politico today. Trump backers applaud Warren in heart of MAGA country. The liberal firebrand draws nods and even a few cheers on a trip through rural West Virginia. You get that rural connection there?
Yes.
Right? It was a startling spectacle in the heart of Trump country. At least a dozen supporters of the president wearing MAGA stickers and nodding their heads, clapping for liberal firebrand Elizabeth Warren. The sighting alone of a Democratic presidential candidate in this town of fewer than 400 people, Kermit, West Virginia, in a county where more than 4 in 5 voters cast their ballot for Trump in 2016 was unusual. Warren's team was apprehensive, but the 63-year-old fire chief warned Warren and her team beforehand the area was Trump country, not necessarily expect a friendly reception, but he also told her the town would welcome anyone of any party who wanted to address the opioid crisis.
Okay.
This fellow was the first responder to a reported overdose 2 years ago, only to discover the victim was his younger brother, Timmy, who died. Okay. He said after the event that he voted for Trump and the president had revitalized the area economically, but he gave Warren props for showing up. She done good. Others agreed. Okay. And talks about that. And Helene Olson was highlighting that. And then she writes, me in October 2018, Helene Olson, Warren remains a formidable political presence. But most important, Warren is one of the few Democrats who consistently calls Trump out on his lies in a way that catches the public attention and can leave him on the defensive in 2020. Helene Olson again in January 2019. The enthusiastic crowds that greeted Elizabeth Warren when she visited Iowa this week weren't supposed to happen, according to some pundits. Her in March 2019. Warren understands something almost intuitive about American society that seems to give most other people trouble. Most of us don't want to think about our finances as often as we are forced to, or rural hospital closing, or the opioid crisis, I would add. And again, Helene Olson, Warren's story of moving from right to left is in many ways as good a case for capitalism with rules, as she describes her beliefs, as any policy paper or proposal, and she's got plenty of those. And again, Helene Olson on April 30th, I think she likes Warren. The senator from Massachusetts connected all the dots to point to both the all-encompassing and systemic nature of the issues facing American workers. And so coming in with actual plans and willing to listen and willing to address is how you show up in Kermit, West Virginia, and get a decent reception. Now, does that translate into votes? Not so much. This is Meg Kinnard from AP writing about South Carolina, for example. 2020 Post and Courier Change Research poll shows Joe Biden with a commanding 46% lead in South Carolina, followed by Bernie Sanders at 15%. Senator Cory Booker, one of the more frequent visitors to South Carolina, saw his support cut in half to 4%. Beto O'Rourke, who drew large crowds in his first swing in South Carolina, sits at 2%, tied with Andrew Yang. And then she adds, and this is the part I'm trying to reconcile with what Helene Olson is writing and how Warren was received in West Virginia. Meg Kinnard writes, interesting quote from this piece about Biden in the Post and Courier. He's not in the scary wing of the party, she said, a sentiment shared by many Democratic leaders in South Carolina to whom she, Meg Kinnard, has also spoken. So the question is, for the moderate conservative half of the party, how do you get Elizabeth Warren's excellent ideas out there without the label of scary part of the party? Which, by the way, I think is one of the reasons why Bernie's just not going to do that well.
That's possible too. You steal them, I think, and deliver them from the non-scary part, or what people think of the non-scary part. I guess the other way is she goes
you show up
and
you
they say, "Oh, you're not scary either,"
and you do that. Now, Harry Enton points out Biden is stronger in polling and weaker in endorsements than I'd have thought at this point. Okay. But a side note on this, Obama did best among college-educated black, young, and very liberal white Dems. Biden's coalition for now is different. He does best among older, moderate, black, and non-college Dems. And you're going to have to do well with black Democratic voters if you have any chance in South Carolina, which is why those numbers are so impressive for Biden at the moment.
Yeah.
Okay. So another thing, I'm looking at the pundits in terms of how they're reacting to these polls. Kyle Kondik, who's at Larry Sabato's place in Virginia, says one lesson from 2016, Trump, that 2020 Democrats should apply. Don't assume the front runner will fade or that somebody else will knock him out for you. Okay. And he's talking about those impressive Biden numbers in South Carolina. And conservative Twitter pundit, Esoteric Jeff, who does politics and music, getting close to thinking that unless something truly, he's at Decision Desk, for example, and a close observer of politics, not a reporter, not a politician, but like me, just one of those observers of politics, getting close to thinking that unless something truly catastrophic happens to Biden, a stroke or terrible senior moment at a debate or some despicable and plausible accusation of sexual wrongdoing. He's not saying these things are going to happen or that they're likely to happen. It's just it would take something like that to happen.
Right.
That unless something like that happens, he's the nominee.
Okay.
Right. It looks
he's
like
getting close
at this
to
particular
thinking
point in time that Biden is in an extremely strong position, despite all the other things that are all true.
Yes.
Which is that other people have great policies, that they're well received in areas you wouldn't expect them to be received. But you look at the polls, and Biden's cleaning up at the moment.
Okay.
So things have to change. If Biden is not going to be the nominee.
Yes. I don't know. I mean, okay, that's not the greatest observation I've ever heard, but all right. I get the point is, people are saying, I guess, okay, he just looked at the numbers and told me, one guy is way out in the lead, but he might not always be. But he is.
Yeah, but you didn't expect that. But you know what? The front runner sometimes does win. Matt Grossman, who's a political scientist, says one Biden strength I didn't fully anticipate but should have, given my constant haranguing about Clinton, is his overt class-based messaging. It's the number one thing voters historically like about Democrats, appeals to Bernie supporters, brings on unions, and makes an electability argument. So Biden is all in on working class, middle class, whatever you want to call it. Now, it may just be rhetoric and not policy, the way Warren has policy. But it's part of Biden's appeal, like it or not. And this is one of those things where these are things that you may not want to hear because you may not like or agree. But you know, you got to work around this here because this is how people are seeing it. Right? That's why the polls are the polls. Twitter also led to misperception, says Matt Grossman, of early Bernie support as solid ideologue. Because he had many non-2016 supporters, included many moderates, women, and minorities, was partially based on perceptions of electability and class-based appeal. And Biden was their second choice. That was dismissed, but it turns out that if Biden's running, some of those people are leaving Bernie and going to Biden.
I mean, they are. I don't know exactly why. I mean, people give me an explanation, and I say, yeah, but are you listening? Do you know anything? Yeah, they're doing it. You got
to get past. I heard what you said, but I don't like him.
Yeah, well, there's that. I mean, I don't.
You got to get past that.
Right? I don't know.
If you want to step back and try to be a little bit more objective and try to look and see where the field is right now.
Right.
This is like having a discussion. Reminds me very much of 2004, and having a discussion about Howard Dean and John Kerry.
Okay. Yeah.
Dean is much more appealing. Yeah, but Kerry is like winning in the polls. He's likely to be the nominee. Oh, well, you hate Dean. I'm just telling you.
Right. I mean,
people were very mad at me then.
It's true. Even now I have very mixed feelings, obviously, about all of them, really, honestly. But
I'm helping you do your therapy out loud in real time, okay?
Yeah.
Because if Biden is the nominee, you're going to have to get over it, and I'm just helping you through
that'll
that
be
process.
easy because I don't, it doesn't bother me a great deal, to be honest. I mean, if I could snap my fingers and have somebody else and it would all work out, I would do that.
Cool.
But and like I say, I have mixed feelings about it. Like, well, okay, there's plenty of time. Okay, yes, there is that. Two, I can't pretend to be terribly impressed with the punditry that says, well, this poll says he's at 45% and the next person is at 15%, so he's the front runner and he'll probably win. Yeah, all right.
Well, but it's more than that. It's more than, well, how did it happen?
It'll never change as a bold
now he's
prediction.
at 45. Where is the change coming from, and which voters have moved to him that make him
more interesting? Obviously.
Right? That part of it is interesting.
Yes, the fact
that one number is bigger than another number, 45. Anybody could do that except the Republican.
But that guy was a Republican. I think the one you brought us, but okay. Anyway, everybody does this. So I'm not too concerned now. It is very early. I don't know, but you're absolutely right. There will be people who will be steaming about it and be sure that you're a under the table Biden supporter. I'm not. I have had nothing good to say. I don't understand what you mean.
I like Warren and Harris myself, but I haven't decided between the two. I know Armando likes Kamala Harris a lot.
Yes.
And a lot of my friends do as well. But Warren's got incredibly good policies. And at the same time, I have doubts about each one of the candidates in terms of their flaws. So, this is something you all take into account when you try to make up your mind.
Yes. I don't know what to tell you. If we end up at the end of the road with a flawed candidate who...
We will, because all candidates are
right?
flawed.
And, but, I can't. I'm not voting for Trump, and I'm not staying home. So what do you think?
Right. So there you go.
Yeah. I mean, that's not a bold.
So say we all,
position.
No matter who wins.
Yeah, that's what. Well, a lot of us say that anyway, and a lot of us get yelled at. Where are your principles? I just want people to live and survive. And there's a lot of people that say they won't unless we, get rid of this guy. So I don't know. It's tough. Okay. All right. I'm with you. And it's time. Our break is nearly coming up. We have 30 seconds to talk our way out of this thing.
Just don't do as Susan Sarandon did. Well, things have to get worse so that they can get better.
Oh, well, that doesn't really
worse is really. I mean, it's pretty bad right now in a lot of areas. And this so-called, the economy is great. This is going to help Trump win. Yeah. Well, think about what we've been talking about in West Virginia and Oklahoma. And no, that's not necessarily true.
Yeah. One, I never believed in that theory ever. Two, I certainly can't. I don't see how you lived through the last round and still believe in that theory. And three, I oppose worse. That's my basic reason for being interested in politics. I support better and oppose worse. That's
I'm with you there.
So, okay.
David's therapy session will resume after the break.
Yes, okay. We'll be right back after, giving away the season ending of something else popular. Is there another television show anyone knows of?
The election.
Give me a call. Yes, right. That's what polls
are.
No
spoilers here.
Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, with a brand new interruption to say thanks to all of you who support the show. Remember when I told you that our average monthly donation was about $7, for which you were getting 2 great hours of news and entertainment 5 days a week, and how that came out to about 70 cents an hour? That's a pretty good deal, except it's wrong. The math actually works out closer to 17 cents an hour. It is hard to beat a deal like that, and even harder to send your kids to college on. Thankfully, Patreon.com makes it easy to make that work. Patreon, Patreon.com, is the simple, secure way to make recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Just search for me or the show name on the site, and they make it easy to crowdfund the show so that the power of our numbers can keep the show going for just a few bucks a month. Once again, thanks so much for all your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We continue sorting out the Democratic field. But we could skip to the end. One person wins. I didn't want to give a spoiler out, but that I have to ruin it for you. Yes, exactly. And furthermore, something else. Yeah, we realized going into the break, polls. Everyone hates polls because polls are spoilers. They tell you how it's going to end. And so you just resist them. No, they're wrong, or it's too early, or it's magic sauce, or
people say stuff like that. But look, I mean, the polls are the polls. It's a snapshot of where we are right now. They're not predictive of how it's going to turn out. Somebody like Donald Trump can start at 5%, for example, and still wind up winning the nomination. That happened in 2016.
I did not see that.
If you want to know where we are right now, the polls are really helpful. So here's a boots on the ground story from Shane Goldmacher writing in the New York Times.
Okay.
Iowa's likely outcome for 2020 contenders, a field of broken dreams. We might as well start with Iowa because, the country starts with Iowa. The nation's first presidential caucus is always important, but with more than 20 Democrats running this time, the need for a strong showing is far more urgent.
Okay, that I believe.
Norm Sturzenbach, a veteran Iowa operative and the state director for Beto O'Rourke, or as the Times calls him, Mr. O'Rourke. They call me Mr. O'Rourke.
Oh, very fancy.
The reason is clear. With 20-some Democrats running for president, there's far more candidates, especially ones counting on strong results in Iowa, than there are slots to realistically move forward in 2020 competition. This means Most of the contenders are bound to depart the Des Moines airport next February, damaged, dispirited, or disappointed, if not politically dead. There's a lot of D's in there.
Cute.
Okay. Well, there's a lot of D's in the primary.
Right.
If you're not in the top three, it's fairly hard to imagine how the campaign can continue, said Norm Sturzenbach, veteran Iowa operative and state director for Mr. O'Rourke. I don't think the bar's too high. It's just the bar for all candidates. So who's going to finish in the top three? The two leaders in the polls, Joseph R. Biden Jr. and Mr. Sanders, they call me Mr. Sanders, must also finish front or risk failing to meet heightened expectations. And those polling closer to zero, and that's like virtually everybody, are wagering everything on an Iowa breakthrough. John Delaney, former Maryland congressman, has opened 8 Iowa field offices and has run television ads in the state and has already visited all 99 counties by last August. Remember, running for president is good for the local economy.
Yes, that is true.
Across the field, Iowa offers a series of ideological, racial, and generational subprimaries. Warren versus Sanders for the mantle of progressive leader, Booker and Harris to be the leading black candidate before the race pivots to more diverse states, Buttigieg, Mr. O'Rourke, and other fresh faces offering a turn of the page on the past candidacy. Robbie Mook says there's no escaping the fact the stakes of Iowa are extremely high. And those who stumble here often drop out quickly. So, yeah, a minute to the end. Oh, my goodness, I'm out.
Yeah, Iowa. All right.
Iowa. All right. We don't like Iowa being first, but it is. You know, it's another one of those I'm telling you things you don't like.
Yeah. Although I've been down on the power
where's
of
that
Iowa
enthusiasm?
Yeah. It's over here.
You got to play that.
Enthusiasm.
We need some. We need some enthusiasm
right
here.
We have it here. I've always been down on the power of Iowa, not only because everyone is disappointed with their going first, except Iowans. But I think since Tom Harkin ran for president, and I thought, well, he's from Iowa. He'll kick everybody's butt in Iowa. And then everyone says you come out of Iowa first, you go on to win. And then everybody just said, oh, Iowa doesn't matter this year. Oh, well, good. Then maybe we'll be able to get Iowa out of that first slot since Iowa doesn't matter anymore. And then the next year, we were back to normal because no one from Iowa was running, and Iowa mattered again. We need to encourage people from Iowa to run for president, but I don't know how many Democrats they have left.
Right. So you will remember Matt Grossman. We were talking about his views about Biden leading in the polls at the moment and what that means.
Yes.
And if you look on the list, the Skype list of things I sent you, there's this rainbow colored tweet way up at the top or kind of in the middle there.
Okay. All right. Yeah. It looks like.
Do you see it?
Yeah. It looks like a chromatograph.
Exactly. So Matt Grossman tweets this: Democratic voters prioritize electability, health care, and unifying the party. And what this is an Ipsos poll, Ipsos Reuters.
All right.
And asks 2 questions. What are the most important factors to Democrats? Likely to beat Trump, strong on health care, can unify the Democrats, strong on the economy, a new and different voice, strong progressive, strong on environment, strong on immigration, those sorts of things. What do Democrats prioritize? And it turns out likely to beat Trump is like 65%, strong on immigration is like 8%, just to give you an idea of the range there. Okay, so the big things, the one that's over 50% is likely to beat Trump, and the next most important thing to Democrats is strong on health care. And then the third most important thing is can unify Dems, and everything else is a lot less.
Yes.
And then they take those things and ask of the candidates, who's the best candidate for each consideration? And what you see here is the biggest, most important thing to Democrats is likely to beat Trump, and the candidate at the moment, snapshot in time, who dominates likely to beat Trump is Biden, which explains why he's doing well.
The color says. Yeah, these pool test strips that you've brought.
Okay. He also leads on can unify the Democrats.
Yeah.
Which is the third thing that people care about. In terms of the second thing that people care about, he and Bernie are tied. And that's why Grossman says Bernie's opening might be healthcare.
Okay.
Right? He says there's few clear openings on what voters care about. but at least it gives you an idea or a feel for what Democratic primary voters are considering when they answer these poll questions and when they actually go and, cast their vote in one way or another, be it caucus or primary.
Yes. Huh. Yeah, I'm looking through this. So let's see. I'm just curious about Bernie in particular. So strong on healthcare is his, by that reasoning, his biggest opening. His second biggest opening is on strong progressive, which is fifth on the list of most important factors to Democrats, which is just interesting.
Likely
to
beat Trump is like 62%.
Yeah.
And strong progressive is like 11%, just to put that in perspective.
I mean, that's another important point. And just, it's interesting. It's interesting that it even made the list. But the fact that it's fifth on the list and it represents 11%, means a lot. There's a lot in that.
Well, it does. I mean, it's the difference between I'm looking for a strong progressive and people are looking for a strong progressive.
Yes,
those are not necessarily the same things.
Me and these 11 people over here, out of the 100 who are in the room, are looking for that, and none of us agree on what that means either.
Right, but 63 or 62 of those 100 people want somebody who can beat Trump. In that category, Bernie is like really small number. Biden dominates, but Bernie's like a really small number.
It's not minuscule, but it looks to be like 13% or so. Is that what? Yeah.
Versus 45 or 50 for Biden. It's just that if you look at that, one of the reasons Bernie's not gaining wider support from what he already has is he's not walking around with the perception, here's the guy who can beat Trump. That may or may not be true, mind you. Right. It's just perception, but that's the perception.
Yes.
Right? Biden is doing very well with likely to beat Trump. He's doing pretty well on can unify Democrats. Bernie has small numbers there too. Yes. As does everybody else.
As a matter of fact, I guess it looks like, am I looking at this here? So it's like, okay, so can unify Dems? Yeah, that's true. It's not that big of a number. Okay. Well, that's an interesting way of looking at things, and it's important at the moment, as I have spotted a few things around Twitter. Perhaps I'll discuss later on. But I'm watching people who ostensibly agree with each other on 90% of everything fight with one another. That's why I love the primaries so much. /hate them. And fight viciously about it. But I'm watching people who otherwise have their heads attached very securely, in most cases, to their shoulders, insisting that, this is we've had our revolution, and that the fact is that the future of the Democratic Party beginning today, right now, is all, if not Sanders, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and everybody's out for her, and it's crazy to cling to the past with Biden. And maybe, and not today, it's not. It doesn't appear. We don't measure that. I don't see that. It's not happening. But it happens that way on Twitter, I guess. And nowhere else.
And people have made that point. And we've talked about Twitter is not the universe of Democratic voters, for example.
No breakthrough there.
And it may be that, maybe Biden isn't the past to the voters who want to vote for him this time. That comfort level, that non-scary part of the party may mean something.
Yeah. If they're willing to do it now in the present, then he's not the past. So, the end.
So let's look a little more local to finish this up, because that's how the voters are perceiving the candidates. Now, what are the candidates perceiving in terms of looking at the voters? This is a local piece. Susan Demis just posted this. She's my Michigan go-to pundit. She writes for Michigan Advance. Her husband, Joe DeSano, is a local Democratic operative.
Okay.
So they have kind of a unique Michigan view here. What presidential hopefuls Michigan stops say about their campaigns? And she's talking about Kamala Harris, who was just there, 2-day swing. Michigan has now been graced with the presence of most major 2020 presidential contenders. No fewer than 11 Democrats, plus Trump and Pence, have stopped by. And candidates continue to act as though it could all come down to the mitten.
Right. Not Mittens. He's in the Senate. But
but the state looks like from the air.
Yes.
And although I stress there are 540 days to go, but Biden hasn't been there yet.
Michigan.
But you
Why
can
is he
expect
ignoring
Michigan there soon enough.
Okay.
Right?
I guess.
And also, Warren hasn't been there.
Oh, well, so there's good reason for that.
Well, whatever. So looking at candidates who determined Michigan was worth multiple stops, Harris, Pence, tech entrepreneur Andrew Yang, and self-described moral and spiritual awakener Marianne Williamson parked themselves in Wayne County.
All of them have been to Wayne County? Is that right?
Go to Detroit. While Pence's visit ostensibly showed the president is making the economic case, the real strategy was belied by Trump's ally Steve Bannon's rowdy anti-immigration rally in Detroit in March. It's not that there are many votes there, and let's face it, few attendees called Detroit home. The event was meant to be a show of force for a campaign that's really about the culture war. Okay. Yang had a nerdy gathering, replete with math signs and PowerPoint chants. At a roofed-out venue where he pitched his universal basic income plan, Harris keynoted the Detroit NAACP fundraiser, where she took aim at the electability narrative for leaving out women and people of color. And one of the centerpieces of her campaign is a $13,500 raise for teachers. So she toured 2 schools in Detroit and 1 in Dearborn and held a town hall with American Federation of Teachers members.
All right.
Okay. In the past, in Michigan, we're talking Michigan here.
Yes. Democrats
have flirted with or outrightly embraced school choice. But those days are gone. So that's important to note.
Okay.
Thank you, Betsy DeVos.
Yeah. All right. So, and you were saying Wayne County. You made it sounded like, I don't know anything about the counties in Michigan. You made it sound like it was this out of the way county. Oh, and then you said Detroit. Yeah. Okay. Wayne County is Detroit. That would make sense then.
Right. African American voters in the state's largest county would seem to be central to Harris's plan to triumph in Michigan's March 10th primary.
Yes.
Beto O'Rourke, whose campaign has been criticized as being unfocused, split the difference and traveled to the 3 major southeast Michigan counties, Wayne, Oakland, and Macomb.
Okay.
With a Detroit stop as a last-minute add-on. O'Rourke, who hails from not very union-friendly Texas, stressed the importance of organized labor in building the middle class while visiting a carpenter's training center.
Okay.
Right? Kirsten Gillibrand campaigned on the Green New Deal.
Oh.
And Sanders stumped in Macomb County, where white blue-collar populace was decisive for Trump in 2016. That's the home of the Reagan Democrat from years back, you may remember.
That guy again.
Right?
Yeah.
But remember that Gretchen Whitmer, who's now the governor, also won Macomb County. But that narrative isn't as fun as remembering it's the place that's where the Reagan Democrats come from.
Okay. Yeah, that's not as exciting, I guess. Yeah, right. How come I don't know anything about Wayne County? I mean, I know Cook County from Illinois.
Well,
that gets talked about a lot, I guess.
What about Kings County in New
sure.
York?
Yeah, I guess. I guess
also known as Brooklyn.
Yeah, but I mean, maybe that just has to do with the Michigan system of government. The county structure is important.
And nobody thinks of Kings County,
No, well, you hear it on the radio from, right? When you talk about the elected representatives.
Richmond. What about Richmond? It's Staten Island.
Oh, okay. I'm like, are you talking about Richmond, Virginia? Like what county? Because that's another interesting thing too. Strange interplay in some states that have strong.
When you get
structures.
local, you learn stuff.
Yes, true.
It's like it's Meriden, Connecticut, not Meridian. Thank you very much, visitors.
Yes. Well, you just got people to realize it wasn't Newton years ago.
Exactly.
Newtown. So, okay. No, really, it's actually said that way. Newtown.
But anyway, so it's just interesting in terms of what people are honing in on, and it's fascinating to watch. And again, this is an article that didn't take sides and wasn't depressing for anybody wanting to run. But the fact of the matter is, Michigan's important. People are spending time there, but where they spend their time, it's just fascinating. For example, that Kamala Harris went to Detroit, Bernie Sanders went to Macomb County.
Well,
and that totally fits with where you would think their campaigns are coming from.
Yes. Well, it's rarely the candidates saying, you know what I like, we should go there. This is what our data says. We need to go here.
This is where our data says our votes are coming from.
Yes.
Right. So that's where we're going.
Right. Well, that's the way it is now, and it tends to work pretty well.
Yeah, it tends to work pretty well. Again, contrast that with Elizabeth Warren going to Kermit, West Virginia, because that's not where her votes are coming from.
Although, so she's borrowing a page from, I don't know what she's really doing, but you could guess she was borrowing a page from almost like the Trump campaign, counterintuitively heading to these places with that.
Yeah, let's go to a local place to make a national statement.
Yes.
And people will at least cover me for being in a place they didn't expect me to be.
Right.
And while they're there, and I'll tell them about my national plan, and maybe they'll cover that too, although usually they don't.
Right. Question 1 is, what are you doing here? Are you crazy? And question 2 is, so what exactly are you doing here? You're
they
saying
liked you. What is it you said that they liked you?
No, that's a great idea.
Let me tell you about my plans. Oh, okay. Bored. Sorry. I'm done.
Gotta go. But go. If there's 20-something of you, I guess if 15 of you are in, Detroit at one time, you're only going to get a narrow slice of the story. And Andrew Yang got the fact that people wanted PowerPoint out of it. Good job. Whereas none of them but Elizabeth Warren thought to go to Kermit, West Virginia, and the whole story's about her as a result. Yeah. So we don't need the Electoral College to drive that.
That's my thumbnail for today. Again, a reminder, Matt Grossman, the guy we've been talking about, is co-author with David Hopkins on Asymmetric Politics.
Okay.
Ideologic Republicans and group interest Democrats, and how the parties are totally different from each other. So I always enjoy his perspective on things.
Okay. He's the guy with the chromatography.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Well, the chromatography actually comes from the Ipsos Reuters poll, but it's an interesting way to display the data that he did,
it around.
So that you get an idea of what's going on here.
All right. Everyone should look at that. It really does look like that, or a pool
and
test
if you go after the show, David publishes the summary of the show in the Daily Kos just about every day, and you can go there. And Scott Anderson kindly does a lot of the summaries there, but that'll be there, and that's where you can find it. It's hard to show you a visual on the radio, but that's where you can go on the internet and actually see what we're talking about here.
That's why I have to tell you, it looks like a pool test strip or chromatograph.
Right. Exactly.
Which is from chromatography.
I was thinking your analysis, but it depends where you're coming from.
Yes, right. Well, you're all pregnant, so that's good news.
Even you guys. All righty, so that's it for today. A little of this, a little of that. So therapy session is over. You'll get my bill in the mail. Take care, and I will talk to you on Wednesday.
All right. Thanks very much.
We'll talk again. Talking is good.
Yes, that's all we have. So we'll take it. All right. Thanks very much, Greg. It's been very informative. We'll all take a look. I wish I could flash you these things over the radio, but you'll have to wait for the links to come out. But we will have them there for you.
I also like showing you political cartoons on the radio. That's equally fun.
Yes, and that always puzzles me. I get them in the Skype list, and I say, I would like people to see this, but I don't know where it came from. You've sent me a picture.
Well, that's just for you to keep your interest up while I'm talking.
I usually come to that conclusion. Say, well, you're all going to miss out on this one.
This is fun. Meanwhile, this is what I'm talking about.
Yep.
Alrighty, take care. I'll talk to you Wednesday.
Very good. Take care. Okay. Time to roll on then and see what else we might round up for your interest. I had mentioned, let me see if I can dig this up. Where would I have found this? Let's see. I mentioned that there's some contentious fighting as usual going on Twitter. Nothing unusual there, but just that there were, pardon me, people that are ostensibly on the same side of most issues, but who are having difficulty grasping, possibly because of Twitter, or perhaps something that's exacerbated by Twitter, exactly where, I guess depending on what we mean by the future of the party. And basically it was chalked up to Twitter being a terrible place to have these discussions, which is possible because, of course, you're limited to short statements and there's a premium on confrontation and snappy repartee, I suppose. And that may contribute to it. But I was taking a look at a conversation highlighted by our friend, whose name we still don't know, a Twitter name we still don't know how to pronounce out loud, Litz, Litzz 11, but now operating, by the way, under the moniker of It's My Country and I'll Cry If I Want To. But we've shared a lot of our insights from Tennessee and on gun issues in particular and various other things. But just an interesting conversation to have highlighted. I guess she was going back and forth with another popular Twitter figure who I think we have referred to on the show in the past, Victoria Brownworth, who, what do we say about this? Is this her initials, VAB? Victoria Brownworth, VABVOX, Vox, like VAB Vox. That's the Twitter handle where you'll find Victoria Brownworth. And I have seen her all over the place. She's very popular, got a giant Twitter following. And this just sort of, I don't know. I mean, it's not like, it doesn't explain the universe or anything, but I thought this was an interesting point that she brings up here. And the post, the featuring this thread starts out by just pointing out Twitter is a garbage communication tool. Example 11 billion. Why do people have to be like this on Twitter with people who agree with them? Now, here's the conversation as between the two of them. You see what we're getting at here. Victoria Brownworth starting things off yesterday with this post. People 50 plus have to stop pushing Biden. And I don't know. I mean, I gather that some of them are just voting for him. Others are pushing him. Others are saying, I don't care. I just want to defeat Trump. And if you say Biden's the guy and 50% of Democrats, for whatever reason, are currently saying the same thing, and then he ends up the nominee, then I'll say yes. I don't know how pushing it is, how pushy, but people 50 plus have to stop pushing Biden. And I don't know. Should I interrupt? No, probably not. Having spent the weekend with committed voters 30 and under, Biden is not even on their list, Victoria Brownworth says. And I'm sure that that's the case in most instances. Although I want, you never know who's the under 30s that you're spending time with. But that wouldn't surprise me. Biden isn't even on their list. But a Harris-Warren ticket, she says, a dream ticket. Black lawmakers pitch Biden-Harris to beat Trump. That is the headline on a Politico piece that she includes in the tweet. Just opening up to take a look at it. Heather Cagle and John Bresnahan put that piece together. Is that, so that's from yesterday. Dream ticket. Black lawmakers pitch Biden-Harris to beat Trump. I'm curious who's pitching that exactly. And I'm sure it's true. Here's one, for instance, Lacey Clay from Missouri is the first one quoted as saying, that would be a dream ticket for me, a dream ticket. And, I'd take it too, I guess. But, I don't know. So it's very interesting. So Biden-Harris is a dream ticket. I would not agree about the dream part. But anyway, it's so this interesting discussion. So she says people 50 plus have to stop pushing Biden, even though, Harris is attached to that. And the pushback here from our friend, It's My Country and I'll Cry If I Want to, that being the current Twitter moniker, if not handle. I'm not a Biden fan, but people over 50 vote. And we're constantly reminded of that. And Greg tells us that all the time. People under 30 need to start participating in elections. Now, that's going to trigger people because, of course, they just did show up and turn out in big numbers to show that they could and would do that. But it's true. They need to start participating in elections. Everyone, meaning, I think, every election, but also, really, honestly, every one of those people at the level that old people do. And Victoria answers, I guess you missed the midterms, which is a decent reply because, of course, people under 30 did perform very well in terms of turnout in the midterms. But that's not the end of the conversation, and it can't be, right? I guess you missed the midterms. I covered them for 6 months. Biden's were voted out, and in their place are young women of color. And again, in some cases, that is true. And in other cases, that is not true. And that's the answer here. No, Biden's were not out. GOP was out. Again, I'm not a Biden supporter, but only 31% of eligible 18 to 29-year-olds voted in the midterms, compared to 70% of ages 60 plus. this is a huge problem, and there's some data to go with it from electproject.org. And, it shows exactly the data stated and exactly as you would have guessed it would be. Victoria's only answer here is, you seem to be the only person in America who never heard of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Ayanna Pressley, Lauren Underwood, Sharice Davids, and the 116th Congress, which of course includes some 220 plus more Democrats than just those 1, 2, 3, 4. And she goes on to say, you should Google them and their elections. They are amazing women. And they are, and they're doing fantastically. And I hope that they stay out front, and I hope they multiply in number. But I hope they multiply in number, because right now they simply don't represent the numbers that can stand there and confidently say that they're the future of the party. They can stand there and say it. They're entitled to do so. They may even be right. And it would be visionary and predictive if they were. And we hope they are. But what they don't represent now is a majority of the party. And for whatever reason, the Biden inclined do. And I mean, there's plenty of new members of Congress, and those 4 are outnumbered, outweighed, and outvoted by far by a long list of people who, most of whom aren't young women of color. They're very often white women, and they're not necessarily particularly young either. They're not as vocal, they're not as outspoken, they're not as out front, but their votes outweigh these 4, and their vote that their coalition represents outweigh the votes, in most cases, that the coalition represented by these 4 listed folks can marshal to their defense, too. And also, by the way, you would probably be told by anywhere from 1 to all of them that it would be wise to keep an ear to the ground and listen to the people who are voting for Biden, at least in terms of what they're looking for, to see if you might be able to offer it even better. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I'm just pausing to try and reorganize the Twitter feed now that I had to dig back and try and find that conversation. I just found that very interesting and a good reminder of, one, remember who you're talking to here, and let's try and stay on the same page. But, that's how a Twitter bubble can kind of form. I mean, I obviously, although sometimes the nature of the interaction makes it a little bit worse. To really answer somebody that way and to say, you seem to be the only person in America who's never heard of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. I think she has. It's a different view of what's going on. And as much as, for instance, if I put myself into the shoes of the participants here, as much as I'd like to see those 4 and the positions they represent occupy a majority of the seats in the caucus, they really don't. I wish they did. They don't. And, as it stands, we have to, as they say, go to war with the party you have rather than the party you might wish to have at some future date. Though you can always fight to get it, and you should be working to get it. And that's a good reason for people to show up at every election. I did see the agreement of Matthew Rigdon saying, absolutely, young people have to start showing up at every election. Every election means every election. Primaries, yes. Referendums, school boards, not just the elections that get talked about on a CW show. What? Okay. Are we talking about, you never know what people mean by CW anymore. Yeah, absolutely true. And primaries being first among them. And I mean, I don't know. I guess they are teaching this lesson out there. But primaries, of course, are how we determine who's going to be representing the caucus if the Democrat is successful in winning the seat. And with legions of Democratic voters motivated to come out, your best opportunity as a young voter to influence the direction of the party is to show up for primaries. I mean, if Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is going to tell you anything at all, it would be that you need to be there for the primary all the time, every time, and bring everyone you know, because you can do things like unseat the fourth-ranking Democrat in the House caucus and replace him with a bartender. And that's not a knock. That's the thing she says about herself all the time, and is a very real thing, and a very real. I mean, that's where she came from. It's just she brings it up all the time. I don't mean to say, well, replace somebody important with somebody not important. I mean, bring somebody real into politics, just the way she does. And that was all about the primary. And when you do bring people out, when young people do show up for primaries, those things do happen. And it doesn't mean political suicide. And it's a great lesson for the older voters in the same district to find out, yeah, they can be handed their hat by an organized cadre of young voters in the primary and then still prevail. Now, granted, the Democrat, any Democrat most likely, would prevail in that district, but good, leverage that. It doesn't diminish the win. It burnishes the strategy. And I would imagine that having seen a success like that, I hope that means, I guess we do have, I guess we don't have data yet to prove whether it's got legs, but I suppose pretty soon we'll see whether young people continue to show up in similar numbers and really do show up for every election, at local, state, and otherwise, primary and general. But hopefully, having seen a victory like that in AOC's district, that sticks, as opposed to possibly, let's say, hanging a mission accomplished banner and walking away and never showing up again. But we have yet to find out. So, okay, I mean, I guess everybody agrees, go to every election. I think we all agree with that here. That's not a huge breakthrough for our audience. You already do it. And you were young once, and you probably did it even then. Just some other comments here. Our friend Ricky, the Canuckistani, as she likes to call herself, says, I voted in every election, in Canada, of course, that I have been eligible for since I was 18, except one. All right, we blame you for that one. Which one was it? In September of 2003, when I was in, it's Canadian, when I was in hospital, Americans say in the hospital, out of province, and Hurricane Juan made it impossible to get home. You know, the famous Canadian hurricane, Juan. I don't remember Juan, but that's probably because it hit you and not me. Well, okay, very good. We'll accept your excuse. I'm okay with that one. CW The Network, says Matthew Rigdon. Riverdale, Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, Supergirl. I was just wondering. I thought that was possibly the case, and then it struck me, do you mean like conventional wisdom shows, like talk show network news chat shows, Sunday shows? That doesn't make a whole lot of sense in context there. But then I was like, well, I hope you're not saying that young people only watch CW or something like that. Oh, but they might. But that would be stereotypical and bad, so we don't say that about people. Okay. And he continues on by saying it's important to realize that Republicans have created most of their success at the state and local level. Very true, and they've been talking about it for a long time. Tactics have changed a little bit, or at least maybe the strategies have changed a little bit. We used to recall that, though, I guess I first got introduced to that strategy when they used to call them stealth candidates. They used to run ultra-conservative Republican candidates used to run for local, often nonpartisan elections and never discuss the fact that they were Republicans, but then they would use the local elected office as a stepping stone to something else where they would eventually, of course, have to declare a party because it wasn't a nonpartisan election. But they had established community credentials and credibility as an elected official and so I therefore deserve to step up to this office, and it works with people. You still have a suit and tie, and that's good, and that makes you an official candidate, and you've been in office around here. I've heard your name, or maybe not, but I see in the newspaper that you're an elected official now, and that makes you viable, and therefore they tend to move up, and that was their plan, and it seems to have worked. Let's see, more from Ricky here. I was taught about elections and voting when I was 10 years old. When the teachers of my grade decided to have a mock election, they mocked elections. That's horrible. I know what you mean. It was to reach how elections worked, but it stirred interest. Well, civics education always wise, I think, in the schools. Yeah, I mean, I know what's going on. And people don't instill that value necessarily in everyone, and it's easy to become discouraged or believe that your vote doesn't make a difference. Of course, it's also, these days we're learning, it's also easy to believe that you're right anyway, and therefore the reason it didn't come out the way you wanted, because you and all your friends and everybody you knew voted for X person, is that it was rigged against you. That's it. Well, people use that as another motivating factor too. And it's not always the case. And what can I tell you? It's a bad pattern to fall into. All right. Moving on to some other subjects, and we'll go and head back to Pocket and pick out a few other things. Would you like something unimportant but personally of interest to me and about politics? I mean, it's not high up there on the list of super important things, but here's what it is. It's another Trump golf story. I want to share this one with you because Trump is disgusting and I hate his guts. Thought I'd throw that out there. Maybe you do too. He's a golf cheater, and somehow there's this weird illicit thrill from seeing how disgusting he really is, cheating at golf. It comes from the damn book again, the same one, but you know how book publishers are. The publicists teach you to put out your book in drips and drabs, and I guess eventually it breaks more people down and they buy the book. This is written up in Vox, How Golf Explains Trump. Seriously. And I thought, that holds more, it sounds like it holds more promise than it really does. It's just a series of stories about how he cheats at golf, some of which are new. So we'll share those. It's Sean Illing writing this up for Vox. Have you ever won a tournament you never competed in? See, we actually have heard that one before, but this gives us a new spin on that one. Have you ever stolen the ball from an opponent to gain a competitive advantage? If the answer to either or both of these questions is no, then you're a normal human being. And you're not cheating at the highest level, which is to say you're not cheating like President Donald Trump. In a new book, which is not new to us because we've talked about it before, Commander in Cheat, sports writer Rick Riley explores Trump's complicated relationship with the game of golf. He has none. No, it's not complicated. He doesn't play golf. He walks around with golf clubs and cheats. And anyway, it explores his complicated relationship with the game of golf and shows the near heroic efforts he makes, bad word, to lie about his scores, sabotage his opponents, and generally defraud the sport. Now, I have heard this story before. Should we go to this? We heard the story, and we heard it in abbreviated form, which was that, one, he brags about how many club championships he's won. And we've heard before that sometimes what he means by that is he opens a brand new golf course, hasn't opened for business yet. And I can understand this. If you develop the golf course, you would want to play the first round on that golf course on the day it opens or the day before it opens or whatever. And so he goes and he does that, and that's fine. But what makes it a Trump thing is then he says, the club opens afterwards, and he says, that first round I played was in fact the first club championship. I declare it hereby the first club championship, and I won it. There was nobody else playing in it. I won it but I'm the boss. Put it up on the wall there. Let's get a plaque. That's what you do at golf courses. You get a big plaque that says club championship. And then you just paint the year, first year number on there, and then put Donald J. Trump and just stick it up there. I say you do it or you're all fired. And therefore he becomes club champion. And probably nobody ever bothers to look into that. And you would think, I guess, it might be the case. If you think Donald Trump is a good golfer, it's somewhat possible that he would win the the club championship of all of his clubs, at least in the first year. And you might even think, well, it's probably because there was like 10 members or less at the time. And, so he may have rigged it for himself, but we don't know how bad it is. Well, this enlightens us somewhat. And I think we heard about this one, about the guy who was club champion, and Trump came up to him and said, you're only club champion because I didn't get a chance to play in the club championship. So let's, right now, you and me go and we'll play for the championship. And he said, the other guy basically said no, but Trump forces him essentially. And then Trump declares himself the winner, having beaten him on one hole or whatever, and says, I'm the champion, and puts his name up there. I think he eventually put him up as co-champion. But it's actually worse than that. Trump's cheating at golf, the article continues, might seem trivial compared to his political shenanigans, but there's another way to think about it. Golf is a game built on self-governance, Riley says, and in that way, it's like a Rorschach test for your morality. And some of the stories about Trump are truly absurd. In a weird way, Riley told me, they say as much about Trump as almost anything else we know about him because it cuts to the core of his character. And then a lightly edited transcript of Sean Illing's conversation with Riley follows. And it puts it this way. Okay, so Sean says, Trump claims to have won at least 20 club championships at his golf courses. What is a club championship? This is Vox, after all. Of course they're going to ask that question. And how many of those has he actually won? Does anybody know? Does anybody not play golf but know what a club championship is anyway? I suspect all of you. It would be the championship of that club, you see. I think you gathered that. But he asks the question because Vox need an explainer. Rick answers, once a year, every country club has a club championship for the best players. The crappiest players play too, but they don't win. It lasts 2 or 3 days, and it's a big thing if you win it. The best player I know of at this level won 8 of these club championships. That's the most I've ever heard of. But of course, most people only belong to one club, perhaps 2 if they're jet setters, but they may or may not play in both club championships. But okay. Now, Trump plays or claims to play in the club championship of all of his courses. And if you're in that business, I would assume you could fly around and play in all of them. You'd have to be good to win or a cheater. And luckily, he is a cheater. So, okay. Trump's going around telling people he's won 20, but that's 100% a lie. I actually played with him once, Rick says, and he told me how he does it. So he loves to confess. He wants to be caught in this. Whenever he opens a new golf course, because he owns 14 and operates another 5, he plays the first club championship by himself and then declares that the club championship and puts his name on the wall, just like I told you. But it's usually just him and Melania in the cart and nobody else. He just makes it up. Sean Illing says, give me the most outrageous cheating story. And thank God he does that because then we can get right to it and then move on. All right. Well, this story isn't in the book. How did we learn it? I don't know. But it's wild. While Trump was meeting with... Oh, okay. Here we go. While Trump was meeting with Kim Jong-un in Singapore, a club championship was held at Trump International, the course Trump built near Mar-a-Lago in Florida. So later on, Trump's back on the course there with the Secret Service and the SWAT team guys and all that stuff. And he sees Ted Virtue. I never heard of the guy, but anyway, he was involved in the financing of the movie Green Book. Leave that aside. He's a rich guy and a good golfer. I could never get Virtue to call me back on all this, but golf.com reported it. That's probably how we figured it out, and I think in less detail. And I heard it from 2 members of the club as well. They say Virtue was there playing with his son. I think that part got left out of the first story. Trump sees Ted on the 9th hole. and decides to drive his cart over. He tells Ted, "Congrats on winning the club championship." Nice, right? "But you didn't really win it because I was out of town." All right, starting to go downhill here. Ted tries to laugh it off, but Trump is dead serious. And remember, he's only joking. He's got a wacky sense of humor. People misunderstand him. Apparently not. Trump is dead serious. Trump says, "We're going to play these last 6 holes for the championship." If he's on the 9th green, there's 9 holes to go. But okay, we're going to play these last 6 holes for the championship. And Ted's like, "Oh, well, I'm playing with my son, but thanks anyway." But Trump says, "It's okay. Your son can play too." So what are you going to do? He's the president. It's his course. They end up playing. You could leave. You can't hit him over the head with a golf club. Not only because he's the president, but, you get in trouble. Anyway, apparently they get to a hole with a big pond in front of the green. That does happen. Both Ted and his son hit the ball on the green, but Trump hits his in the water. Very obvious, right? By the time they get to the hole, though, Trump is lining up the son's ball, that is, to putt it, and try to sink it. Again, he has hit the ball in the water. They both hit the ball in the green. Now, remember from other stories that Trump very often takes off immediately after hitting his ball, jumps in his cart and drives off, which is terrible golf etiquette. You're not supposed to do that. But he very often will drive away immediately in order to fix his shot. If he hits it in the woods, he'll drop another one on the fairway and just say, "There it is, I found it." Or his caddy will do that stuff. We heard about the one the other day where he hit the ball. Somebody else put the ball on the green and he got it in the bunker. Trump hit it in the sand trap near the green, and that the caddy was up there and switched the balls. He put put Trump's ball on the green and threw the other guy's ball in the sand. Well, same trick. So that happens. So they get up to the hole, and Trump is lining up to putt one of the balls that's on the green as though it's his, even though everybody saw his ball go in the water. But it looks like Trump is lining up to hit the kid's ball. Out of the 2 of them he's playing with, he decides to hit the kid's ball. 11-year-old kid. Only now it says it's his ball and the caddy has switched it. Now the son is like, "That's my ball." But Trump's caddy goes, "No, this is the president's ball. Your ball went in the water." Just right to his face, right? Ted and his son look at each other confused, not sure if this is really happening. Unfortunately, that means you're normalizing things and you don't even know it. But I don't know what I would do either, right? Trump makes the putt and declares himself the winner. Then, according to golf.com, he tells Virtue something like, "I'll tell you what," just so there's no hard feelings, right? "I'll tell you what, we'll be co-champions." But the members tell me that when you look at the plaques on Trump's locker there, it says 2018 Men's Club Champion. No co at all. I guess maybe on the big plaque on the wall where they list the champions, there might be 2 co-champions. But on his locker, apparently that's a thing in golf clubs too. You win the championship, you get a little plaque on your locker. So that's what he put up there, 2018 Men's Club Champion. How amazing is that? There's more, and we'll skip the rest of it because you don't need to know that much about Trump and his golf. But I just thought that was kind of an amazing addition to a partial story we heard before. He does this to an 11-year-old kid. Your ball went in the water. How do you be the caddy? How do you stomach? I guess it's if you pay people enough, they'll do anything. But it's still hard for me to fathom how you just throw a kid's ball in the water and say, "That's the president's ball," and just insist that that's true. I saw it, you saw it, we all saw it. And I don't know. I guess what you do at that point is you just refuse to continue to play and you start screaming. But there's no photographers around to document the thing. And even if there was, what do you get out of it? The story that says the president cheats at golf? Of course the president cheats at golf. Over the weekend, by the way, I noticed that his role model and puppet master Putin played in a hockey match. He likes playing hockey. And apparently he scored 10 goals. He's like, it wasn't which Kim was it? It's not Kim Jong-un's father. What was his name again? Kim Jong-il? Was that the one who played golf for the first time and got an 18 holes in one or something like that? So Putin plays hockey and he scored 10 goals. It's amazing what happens here. And Donald Trump plays golf. Now he wants to play golf like Putin plays hockey. So he just does. Yeah. Anyway, moving on with some other things here, somewhat more important. There are a few other things that I will add to the list for your consideration. This one, I think, as you know, Daily Kos is like getting the newspaper early, and we very frequently make the right calls on things. Now now the news is that listening to Daily Kos radio is like getting Daily Kos early. I saw this one on Friday. Jen Hayden, Scoutfinch, wrote this one up. So we have some movement on this front that helps bolster our early take on the story from down in Mar-a-Lago. The FBI, the headline reads, the FBI is investigating whether Florida spa owner, Cindy Yang, right, funneled money from China to the Trump campaign. And of course, my first reaction is, of course she did. I said she did. And then I realized, who am I? What evidence did I have? Oh, yeah, right. I didn't have any. There were these stories, and that was the only logical conclusion. But okay, so now it's serious. So now I'm reading this because now the FBI thinks there's something there and it's worth their time to look at it, which makes it a real story as opposed to my guess that she was a Chinese spy / conduit for illegal campaign contributions. So we'll put that on the record via Jen's story here. Who could ever have guessed New England Patriots owner Robert Kraft getting arrested for soliciting prostitution would lead to the FBI investigating whether the Chinese have been funneling money to the Trump re-election campaign? But here we are. Now, of course, the answer is I would have, but that's because I didn't view, and a lot of us didn't view the story as Robert Kraft getting arrested for soliciting prostitution. The big story was, where was he and who owned the place? Oh my God, they're all over Mar-a-Lago, and there's no reason for that to be true. So obviously the answer is Trump is using it to steal money. And I think we're probably right about that because it's Donald Trump and he's easy to read. But there's a lot of steps between that and the FBI now says, yes, it's true that he is doing that and she is funneling money from China. They're not yet ready to say that. But I think very shortly they'll come to that conclusion. But let's continue. To recap, after Kraft was arrested, the Miami Herald noted the spa's founder, Cindy Yang, was a frequent guest at Mar-a-Lago and had been photographed with Donald Trump at the private club on several occasions. I mean, at that point, it's a dead giveaway, right? She used these photos to prove she had access to the president, and others could as well for a price. The grift began from the moment Donald Trump took office. Yang hosted an event at Trump's inauguration in Washington, D.C., and those funds have never been accounted for to this day. We talked about that as well. From the Palm Beach Post, this excerpt, which reads, but there's no trace of the money raised that night, as required by law, the Palm Beach Post has found. That includes donations by their biggest listed sponsors, among them an embattled Saipan-based casino, later raided by the FBI, a Guam-based shipyard, and a handful of Pacific Island hotel operators, all of which benefited from a foreign labor bill signed into law by Trump a year later. Now back to Jen's account of things. Yang pivoted out of the spa business and into the influence business, also known as the business of corruption, taking money, promising access, and getting access through events at Donald Trump's private club, Mar-a-Lago. Not just to Donald Trump, Yang peddled access to his children, cabinet members, and other influential deplorables hanging around the scene. This is precisely what national security experts repeatedly sounded the alarm about when Trump announced he would still be a frequent guest at his private club. The Trump organization even doubled the club fee after he won. It's shockingly blatant corruption. But who was buying access from Yang. The FBI is now taking a look, and the Miami Herald reports this excerpt. Investigators obtained a federal grand jury subpoena, a subpoena, really, on Tuesday, seeking records from Bing Peranio, really, P-E-R-R-A-N-I-O. Bing Peranio, an employee of Yang's family spa business who last year contributed a maximum $5,400 to President Trump's re-election effort. If you think that's suspicious, then you're on the same page as the FBI. Where would this money come from? How could this employee have it? Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Shall we continue then with Jen's brief write-up of the story of the FBI investigating Cindy Yang? I think so. We didn't get all the way through the Miami Herald excerpt here. And the story of Bing Peranio, I'm guessing is the last name. That I would never have put those two together. But this is the employee of Yang's family spa business, or I guess they're Yang's family's spa business. It's not a family spa, but by any stretch of the imagination. So, okay. Anyway, she contributed the maximum, $5,400 to Trump's re-election effort, according to a source familiar with the probe. Yang came to Peranio's workplace and helped her write the check, because that's difficult to do. How do you spell Donald Trump, right? Peranio told reporters from the New York Times, who first reported the contribution, Peranio told the Times she didn't, quote, say no. Whatever that's supposed to mean. I mean, I think we're supposed to get it. She got forced to do it. The subpoena asked for any records related to that March 5th, 2018 donation, and possibly other contributions between 2014 and the present, said the source, who asked for anonymity to discuss an ongoing federal investigation. Okay. Now, Jen asks, does a spa employee donating the maximum to a presidential re-election committee sound suspicious? The FBI is investigating whether that employee was reimbursed. FBI agents based in West Palm Beach are trying to determine if Yang reimbursed Peranio for that contribution or delivered anything of value to her over that period to benefit the Trump campaign. Reimbursing someone for a political contribution without disclosing the original source is illegal, as is making a contribution in someone else's name. So either way, it's kind of suspicious, right? Agents are seeking records from Peranio, a potential witness in the investigation, that are linked to Yang, Yang's husband, their businesses, as well as Trump campaign entities and the Republican National Committee. Bad time for them. Now, Jen concludes with re-quoting that, as well as the Trump campaign entities and the Republican National Committee. Sounds like this investigation is just getting started and may widen significantly. It is absolutely shocking this story isn't front-page headlines in every major newspaper in this country. I believe she's right about that. These allegations and investigations would sink any other president before Trump. Today, it's barely moving the news needle. Just one more data point showing how far we've strayed from normative behavior and press coverage. At least normal behavior and press coverage, anyway. Yeah. I mean, I don't know what else to do. I wanted to share that with you just to validate our suspicions from earlier. Definitely jumped the gun on those suspicions, no doubt. But we're right. Come on. What else is she possibly doing there? There's No other explanation for this. So there you go. Now, if you were feeling guilty about having jumped the gun, at least there's some background there, and you can point to that. Let's see. Other important issues, and there are several. I want to sort of skim some of these possibilities real quick and make a few decisions. There's a lot to it. How about this? Because we focused on Ricky's comments and therefore Canada, I want to share with you a very interesting tweet thread spotted this morning from Aaron Brook, Erynn, an interesting spelling of Aaron. Aaron Brook, who is admittedly Canadian. Do we have some? Oh, yeah. Right. I don't know. Does it make a difference? Yes, it does. It's important to the story. Aaron Brook writes the following. I'll just read it. Sometimes people ask me why I'm so vocal about abortion in the U.S. since I'm Canadian. It's a fair question. I think so. That makes good sense, right? And here's the answer, which also makes good sense. A few years ago, I worked at the university library. By the way, where? I don't know. She's currently based in Ontario. I don't know if it matters what university. The point is that she did. I worked at the university library. I was walking through campus and came across some anti-abortion protesters. Why? I don't know. It just, look, they're there. The end, right? Counter protesters were standing in front of them with poster board and other signs trying to block the horrific posters that the anti-abortion protesters were using. Just to editorialize a little bit there. We had some big cardboard slabs at the lab, so I arranged to give them some of those so they could use those instead. Be better at blocking the pictures and posters that the protesters were using. It was an exam week, and I just couldn't stand the callousness of people displaying triggering images to students who were hurrying to and from the library to take an exam and might be affected by these. So I arranged a buddy walk, someone to escort you past them if you wanted. Okay, good, right? Sounds smart. I called the cops at one point, and they came and said that it was city property and they had a right to protest. But looking at their materials, something felt wrong. Something felt not protesty. Good instinct here, Aaron. During one of these encounters with anti-choicers, my picture was taken. Next thing I know, I see my picture on their social media being promoted as like, oh, look at Maria, I don't remember her name, talking to this young woman about the importance of life or something. I was actually arguing with her. In fact, I tore up her pamphlets. But the photo didn't show that. Facebook and Instagram removed the photo, but I wanted it off their website, this organization's website as well. So I started the process and discovered this was a company. Now I'm really intrigued, right? Like a real company with directors and managers and a lawyer on retainer. This was supposedly a protest, right? And this group protesting, they're going to have a group and they're going to have a website, but she runs into a corporate structure. How interesting. I've been doing support work for on-the-ground organizers and social justice campaigns for a while. And having a receptionist and a lawyer is not, I guess usually anyway, not a thing that, quote, protesters have. So I dug deeper. Turns out this was, and see if this rings a bell for you Canadians. It doesn't for me, but the story goes on to make a lot of sense of things anyway. So you don't have to be Canadian to understand this story. It turns out this was the Canadian Centre, and you know how they spell that, wrong, R-E. Canadian Centre for Bioethical Reform. Does that ring bells for any of you Canadians? They, quote, support student groups with team leaders and marketing materials. This wasn't a protest. This was PR. And they had a plan. Their lawyers were specifically targeting billboarding laws. That is, things that would allow them to display their stuff on buses. And there is a website link supplied in this tweet. Well, if you'll pardon the anti-choicer terminology, what would they call their website? Of course, they would call it endthekilling.ca. Not .com because Canada, right? endthekilling.ca/strategy. I guess that is the page that explains what they're up to, our strategy. And, it's all laid out there, and it's rather lengthy. And it even invokes Martin Luther King Jr., so you'll be really happy about that. But I guess this is what explains what they're up to. Now, Erin continues, I had to find the webmaster. Remember, she's trying to get her picture taken down, the picture that they're using, trying to illustrate. They're trying to portray that this is one of their activists, I guess, talking somebody out of an abortion or something like that. Or, talking reasonably with somebody about abortion and spreading the message. Look, we don't just keep the money, we spread the message. Keep donating to us. I had to find the webmaster to request my picture be taken down. It was this one guy who was also the webmaster for CCBR, Canadian Centre for Bioethical Reform. And just about, he was not only CCBR's webmaster, but also for just about every student anti-abortion group in Ontario. Ricky says she's heard of the group. Yes, so that means 100% of Canadians surveyed know exactly who we're talking about. I imagine a lot of you have run into them in the past, or are about to. How about that? She's finding the webmaster. The webmaster for CCBR is also the webmaster for every student anti-abortion group all over Ontario. He was also one of the supervisors at these so-called protests. But as an employee, he was paid to be there. So paid protesters, but, of course it looks like he's just a protester, but he's a supervisor there. Now, CCBR didn't evolve organically in Canada. Oh, no. That's actually right in there. Oh, no. It was founded in 2001 as a branch of CBR, the Center, spelled correctly in this case, for Bioethical Reform, founded in 1993 in the States by none other than, and maybe this name will ring a bell for you in Canada, not so much for me, or maybe here in the U.S. for abortion activists, none other than Greg Cunningham. I'm blank on that one, but she explains he is still the executive director there to this day. Who is Greg Cunningham? This is like a Vox explainer. Greg Cunningham was a Republican Pennsylvania lawmaker who created the Thornburg case. Dick Thornburg used to be the attorney general in Pennsylvania. That's how his name got on it, right? Which went to the Supreme Court and was amended as the Casey decision. It wasn't amended, but it was renamed, I guess. The case, as in Casey versus Planned Parenthood. Ah, yes, that one we remember, right? She includes one of her own tweets here, by way of illustration here, which reads, the next big moment for abortion in the U.S. was Planned Parenthood versus Casey, where the Supreme Court upheld a Pennsylvania law requiring mandatory waiting periods and parental consent. That's an entirely separate thread explaining not only Casey, but I guess where it fits in the history of abortion litigation. But this thread goes on by saying Casey versus Planned Parenthood is a landmark case because the Supreme Court upheld Roe v. Wade, but said that states may regulate abortion to protect the health of the mother and the life of the fetus, and may outlaw abortions of viable fetuses. Casey opened the gates for states. And of course, we're watching now the southern states in particular, plus Ohio, right, passing these outrageous and draconian abortion restrictions, which by all indication are designed to provoke controversy and put Roe v. Wade directly before a newly right-wing Supreme Court as quickly as possible. So, The thread then continues with Aaron saying, apologies. CBR was founded as privately funded, not-for-profit company in 1990. I guess she had the date wrong earlier. Or maybe for clarity's sake, the Canadian Center was founded in 2001 as a branch of Center for Bioethical Reform, founded in 1993. Then she says, okay, apologies. It was in 1990. You can read Greg's own words on it here with a link. Ask to an article called Ask the Attorney, an interview with Greg Cunningham about God knows what, but on the lifelegaldefensefoundation.org website. You can imagine for yourself what that's going to say. Aaron goes on, though, to talk more about him. Where else has Greg Cunningham popped up? Answer here is Europe. Reproductive justice advocates in Ireland. Are you listening, Ireland? If you're listening, Ireland, find Trump's emails and find out about this guy. Reproductive justice advocates in Ireland may be especially familiar with his tactics, if not necessarily his name. Here, including a link from NBC News under the headline, Meet the American Peddling Abortion Pictures Abroad. And the little blurb here says, it's no coincidence that the anti-abortion movement looks the same from London to Dublin to Warsaw. It's mostly California-based Greg Cunningham, I guess, who is to blame in all this. To see what else they have to say about him. No, they're not going to give me the rest of that caption. But okay. Basically, in other words, I guess what we're really finding out here is that this Center for Bioethical... What was it? Center for Bioethical Reform is the ALEC of anti-abortion movements. He provides them with all the materials and arguments and posters and doodads and knickknacks like the little rubber fetuses that they can pass out in legislative settings. I've seen that happen here in the Virginia State Legislature, but, out on the street as well. Aaron continues, Canadians have heard a lot about CCBR in the past few years. Ricky says it's true. Even if they don't remember. Then it goes on to say, summer jobs grant not going to places that didn't support reproductive rights and LGBTQ folks. That's CCBR. I'm not certain I can make heads or tails of that, but here is a CBC report here. Group at center of summer jobs storm stirs debate over graphic anti-abortion images. This is a story from February of last year. Canadian Center for Bioethical Reform singled out by Justin Trudeau for hateful flyers. Interesting, maybe a familiar story to those of you up north. Aaron continues, though. You know those anti-abortion sting videos? That's Greg Cunningham. And here, too, a link to the Center for Bioethical Reform's, I guess, press release about these things in one of their lawsuits. But I guess they run sting videos along the lines of maybe the O'Keefe work here in the United States as well. So they're up to quite a bit. Aaron continues on even further. Y'all ever been involved? And y'all that's an American copyright. You owe us money on that one. Y'all ever been involved with charity finances before? Tell me what you're seeing here, because I am 100% certain that Greg, who lives in California and worked as a Justice Department official in the Reagan administration, is not making $66K a year, or at least not only, right? And here is a link to Charity Navigator, which I guess comes up with their supposed disclosure forms claiming that they're only paying him $66,000 a year for this work. How do places like CBR and CCBR have such low administrative costs if they're employing people around the country to protest abortion? Oh, I don't know. I think she does, but I don't know. Maybe it's because they make people fundraise their salaries. And she includes a link to a page here, interestingly enough, I guess an example of what she's talking about. It's a post on a personal blog, it looks like, from a person by the name of Samuel Say, S-E-Y. And the title of the piece is, "I'm joining the staff at the Canadian Centre for Bioethical Reform." And basically it goes on to brag about all the fantastic things that they're going to do at the CCBR, and then I guess beg for money to support the mission. I won't read you the thing because, of course, it's filled with, kind of graphic, made-up nonsense about abortions and what goes on during them. But the idea here is, I guess, to drum up support from his readers and say, if you all support me in this mission, you can donate to, I don't know whether you're supposed to donate direct to CCBR or direct to the person who's doing the work or whatever, but I guess they keep their overhead low by paying people next to nothing, which is, okay, that's fine by me. And then the people who are doing the work are instructed to hit up the anti-abortion crowd for donation money. And we're only paying you dirt because we're going to also give you instructions to dupe the community out of the rest of your salary, which is okay, honestly, because we were going to do the duping work and then give you the money, or you can do the duping work on your own and let them donate the money directly to you or earmark it for you or what have you. And then we don't have to do that, and we don't have the overhead expense of raising that money. It's actually quite brilliant, to be honest. Aaron continues, "Anyway, that's just a small sliver of the reason why I'm so vocal." And here we finally get to the bigger, larger point. This isn't an America issue. It's a global issue, and the U.S. is a megaphone. Not just that, they have actual companies, representatives, and campaigns running in other countries promoting their propaganda. In terms of who is funding them, well, that's hard to say. Every one of these organizations is run by a lawyer, and there are networks of LLCs, we've talked about those, involved just to make the money difficult to trace. I went down a rabbit hole once and found that tracking lawyers was easier than tracking money. And I bet you'll find that that's the case if you want to help take up some of this research. If you'll likely find that several ostensibly or organizations that are representing themselves as independent, whether student chapters at different college campuses of this organization or others like it, all have 5, 6, 7, 10, 15 of them all have the same lawyer, which is to be taken, I think, as a tip-off that you will find money moving rather seamlessly between them as well. But you wouldn't see it at the with a surface glance at their tax disclosures, for instance. The only hint that's out there that they're related and moving money around is the fact that the same lawyer signs the documents for several such organizations. Now back to the tweet thread here. After saying she went down the rabbit hole once, found that tracking lawyers was easier than tracking money. But in terms of political campaigns and money, the place you want to keep an eye on is the Susan B. Anthony list. And that's a name I recognize, and that's a name I've heard before here in the United States. She links to opensecrets.org from the Center for Responsive Politics for their the entry into the Susan B. Anthony list, their total contributions, and from there are all sorts of interesting links that you can explore. They're pretty easy to spot, as they are not at all subtle about what they're doing. And here a link to the Susan B. Anthony list website, sba-list.org. This particular link, Kavanaugh confirmation, a resounding victory for, for their side. How do they put it? For a resounding victory for the American people, says the press release from the Susan B. Anthony list. And in Canada, she continues, is CCBR supporting anti-abortion politicians? Well, let's put it this way. This is Right Now. And I don't know, that doesn't ring a bell for me, but I guess that is a Canadian organization, I assume supporting right-wing politicians, right now, as in one word, right now, capital R, capital N. And here a link included here from a tweet from, I don't know who this is, Andre Domise, D-O-M-I-S-E, contributing editor for Maclean's. We've already seen in Ontario and Quebec how provinces can exploit constitutional loopholes to enact oppressive legislation, and how PEI, yeah, that's you, Rick, right? How PEI all but wiped out abortion services for 3 decades. So I'll bet that's a story you're familiar with as well. Right now, it turns out, in the next tweet, had supported another name that doesn't ring a bell for me, but will for you up in Canada, Sam Oosterhoff. I don't know if this is Osterhoff, but it's spelled Oosterhoff. Oosterhoff. Some links here, and then the message, Sam Oosterhoff, who is this guy, and the link here to another tweet from CBC Toronto. Let's take a look at that link briefly. That's a tweet from CBC Toronto with the quote, "We pledge to make abortion unthinkable in our lifetime. PC MPP Sam Oosterhoff," with a link to their story about it. So that right now is the organization supporting Sam Oosterhoff. Oosterhoff is the guy who says, "We pledge to make abortion unthinkable in our lifetime." Aaron continues about, I guess, Oosterhoff, who just happened to have a bunch of anti-abortion protesters show up in support of his campaign on voting day in the Niagara region, though he said they were not affiliated with his campaign. And here a link once again to a report from the Toronto Star here. 19-year-old student wins Niagara PC nomination. Sam Oosterhoff is that 19-year-old student, I guess. A student at Brock University beat out the president of the Progressive Conservatives to become the party's candidate in Niagara. Aaron continues, but they were probably associated with his church, those protesters that showed up. Oh, these guys aren't associated with my campaign. Brian Monroe now chiming in all the way from Canada. Just FYI, Sam Oosterhoff is not well known in Canada. Okay, well, he's too young to be well known, I guess, in Canada. But take a look, is all I can say. I want to warn you the way Aaron is warning you. So, he shows up on voting day with a bunch of anti-abortion protesters supporting his campaign. He says they're not from his campaign, but she says they were probably associated with his church. And there's an Oosterhoff on a CCBR newsletter from last summer. Watch Andre Domise's timeline for an article on the church soon, because I didn't even get into that piece here. And this is pretty interesting because Andre is busy tweeting. Hang on a minute, he says. Are people just not aware of his church? What's his church? It's the Dutch Reformed Church. Are you not aware of it? He asks, because that I am. And I don't know how many people that does ring a bell for, but Andre says, the Dutch Reformed Church, are you completely oblivious of Afrikaner Calvinism? Because if so, I must sound like I'm barking mad over here, ringing alarm bells over Oosterhoff. Going to remedy that with a column. So keep an eye out for that, friends in Canada, please, and send it our way. Let's see if we can't wrap this up before heading out for the day. Anyway, Aaron says, if you see an abortion protester with one of these big, disturbing graphic images that say choice or abortion is murder, and that's a fairly common one, that's Greg Cunningham's work. And that's not a protest, that's advertising. And then, of course, some interesting responses that she's getting to her tweet thread that she is sharing with people, some of which are scary type threats and others of which are tweets of support. But that was very interesting to me. And though the whole thing appears to be taking place in Canada, of course, it has its roots here. All the worst crap we're exporting to you. I'm very sorry about that. But I wanted to raise the alarm bell about that. I found that really very interesting. And for you Canadians, it'll be fascinating and probably scary. But it's not without value for us here in the United States, too. We're going to have to help you turn this fire hose off. But it's going on in Canada, going on in Ireland, and around the world. And, well, it's a little scary and maybe working more or less in parallel with the same weirdos that get referred to these days generically as domestic terrorists, but which I keep saying, remember, there's an international organization behind these guys, and even our domestic terrorists are claiming foreign actors as their motivation. And of course, for there to be a connection with the Dutch Reformed Church, I don't know if that's been established, but I'm going to keep an eye on this guy's writing and see if we can't find out more about it, because, well, the prime movers behind Afrikaner apartheid, well, you know, there's a weird overlap with our white supremacy here once again. How odd is that? Well, Ricky says this makes sense to her, and so we'll keep following that story. Thanks for listening. I know it was a little bit of a departure from American politics, but well worth doing, I think.
From Daily Kos Radio on netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Well, Justice Putnam at the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy will take you back stateside and then around the world, as he usually does in the second half of his show. Let's see what's on top here. Well, Trump-Russia probe, obviously. Stephen Miller plots to make 55,000 American brown kids homeless. We'll hear more about that and a look around the world, as usual, at the end of the show. Stay tuned.